If you want to start composting and you've never figured out how yourself, this is the right video for you. Stick around to the end to see the entire process start to finish. I promise you won't be disappointed. Welcome to the Urbstead. I'm Ben, and behind me you will see the end product of what we are going to be learning how to create today. In this quick tutorial, I will be sharing with you the ingredients that I'm going to be using in a made-from-scratch compost pile. I will give you some tips and tricks about composting itself, answering some questions about what could go wrong and how to prevent those things. And all the while, I will be showing you my step-by-step process to build a new compost pile. This will be a compost pile that we are going to be using for the next year as we sort of transition out of the growing season in these next couple months and into winter. Come along. Okay, so we're here in the backyard and the sun is pretty harsh here, but before they totally destroy it, I want to share with you the ingredients that we're going to be using in today's compost pile. Over here we have freshly cut grass. Behind it there's a small pile of dried grass clippings. Here where the chickens are working, this is broken down leaves that have been sitting on the side of the house for approximately 6 months all the way up to 18 months from the year before. We have a pile of wood shavings and sawdust. And then finally in the wheelbarrow we have chicken manure, which is poop, partially broken down food, some grass clippings, all matted together nicely in those chunks. So let's go ahead, we're going to take all these ingredients, we're going to mix them up and place them in this pile. The final ingredient will be a scoop from our current compost pile that is just packed full of worms, microbes, and fungi. These three things are going to sort of inoculate the new pile, as well as sort of travel through the ground up into the pile. So I would argue right now that if you took any scoops from surface level and down, you would get a pretty similar composition as to what is in this pile right now. But the inoculation will sort of assure that this new pile starts out with some good bugs. Okay, so these chickens have properly mixed up everything. Now you'll notice, and maybe you have the thought, hey, why don't you just let the chickens do the mixing? I can do that, and in a way that's what they're already doing. The problem is space. They're just going everywhere with it. And when you spread it out like that, what you don't get is heat. Nothing's going to process very quickly because everything is too spread out to really mix well. So right now I'm just going to be throwing everything together. You'll notice I'm not really mixing yet, and that's because I don't really think there's a ton of material in total. And I have the wrong set of tools. Thank you, chickens. That's better. Scoop of this, scoop of that, scoop of this. Another thing you'll notice is these chickens love to scratch in this stuff, specifically the broken down leaves from the other side of the house. They have already formed a sort of compost, if you will, in that the bottom layer is really, really finely broken down. And this is what that looks like. I mean, this is basically what you would call leaf compost. At this point, it smells like beautiful earth. And this is great stuff. So when I'm adding this in, I could just as easily throw this on top of our beds, but I would argue that this is probably going to be a little less nutrient dense and maybe just really heavy on the nitrogen or the carbon. I am not I'm not a certified scientist to know that, but I do know that our leaf compost does not have as good a results as when we have placed our own full compost on things. So, sort of a guess, but I do know it'll be a great addition to a compost pile. Oh, wow. Series of unfortunate events. Sorry, chicken. That looked painful. So sorry about that. Let's get that off. While I'm going through this work here, I wanted to give you a couple tips on things to look out for and reasons for why you're doing compost. When you're doing your compost, if you notice that things are stinky, very stinky, that means that you have run into anaerobic digestion, which could be caused primarily by two things. A, not enough oxygen, or B, too much water, which also leads to not enough oxygen. So, if your compost pile is stinky, ways that you can manage that is by going out and turning it periodically. I've seen intervals of every couple weeks, all the way up to once a week. Another issue is that it's too hot. What happens if my bed is too hot? On the very worst case scenario, a bed that is too hot can cause a fire. This is typical when you look at industrial sized composting and less typical when you're looking at personal sized composting, but it is a thing to be aware of. Now, the cause for this is the nitrogen carbon ratio is out of balance. And by out of balance in this case, I mean you have way too much green for your brown. Experts will say anywhere from 50-50 is good, all the way up to 30-1 carbon to nitrogen, green to brown. Oh, sorry, brown to green. If your compost pile is not heating up at all, one of the issues there could be not enough green, not enough moisture, or not enough air. So if you take the first point and this point together, you can start to see that the mixture of water and air and compost has got to be a little specific. Don't worry, it's not that scientific. I've been able to do it decently well, and I'm pretty lazy when it comes to trying to do composting. My recommendation is when you get the bed turned and tossed and mixed, you dump maybe 1 5-gallon bucket's worth on top of the pile if your pile is a similar size to this. You'll want to just dump it sort of all around so it gets most of the pile damp. And then you will cover it with black plastic to ensure that no further moisture gets in, as well as ensuring that evaporation does not happen too quickly to the moisture that's inside. This all comes after the fact of you going in with a pitchfork and turning it like you will see me do and have seen me done in the past. So there you go, you got your oxygen mixed in, and then you also got your moisture, without being too moist, taken care of. We're just about done here. A stinky compost pile can also be managed through one of the tumbling composters, which is sort of like a little black drum that you rotate periodically, and that ensures that aeration is happening regularly. The downside is that I'm not really sure at what point you stop putting compost materials in and at what point you start to take and empty out all of the finished compost. Okay, so as a review, I threw in some green grass, some dried grass, a load of manure from the chicken run, a bucket and a half, so probably about 7 or 8 gallons of sawdust, and a wheelbarrow load full of decomposing or broken down leaves. And once everything's sort of all the way topped up here, we're going to give it a really thorough mix, as well as throw in the addition of 1 scoop from our finished compost pile. Now, you may be saying, Ben, I don't have a chicken run to get chicken manure from, which is fine. Maybe you don't have access to a wood shop, to which I would say find a woodworking friend, or look on Facebook Marketplace, or any other sort of local posting center. Most times wood shop people have an excess that they are happy to get rid of for free, if only someone would come and pick it up. If that's not possible, well, then you'll need to find a different source of brown. My answer to that is that most people live in a place that every fall they get a massive deposit of brown compost material directly to their lawn in the form of leaves. If nothing else, if you have a yard with at least 1 tree, I believe you have enough to compost. You can make dried grass from your lawn, you can make fresh grass clippings from every time you mow, and you could have a pile of leaves. And then, not everyone has a starter pile to pick from for an inoculation. That's okay. It's not necessary. It just helps speed the process up. But even that, if you got creative or have a friend who's a kooky gardener who quit his job and happens to live at the end of your street, come take a bucket, get a scoop, take it back to your house, and start your compost pile. Hint, hint, you guys are always welcome to come get a scoop. Everyone gets 1. Right, Spider-Man? Okay, so that is so much green, but I know that sawdust is very, very brown. So I feel pretty confident that this mixture is not going to be too imbalanced. Maybe leaning towards the green side. I'm okay with that. I wouldn't mind it getting hot quick. This pile is ready to be inoculated and then tossed. Ooh, beetles. Oh yeah, just a mountain of worms. So we can see little white lines kind of working in and out, little patches of white. That is the fungi. And actually the mycelium, I think, would be the technical term there. You can also see worms, loads of worms. And then I just got to trust that microbes are also in the mix, which I'd find it hard to believe that they weren't. So as far as ingredients goes, this pile is done. I'm going to go ahead and give it a tossy toss. Going to water it in and cover it up. Call it a day. Now, dig deep. You don't need a gym membership. You just need to start farming. Okay, maybe a gym membership might still be necessary, but or appreciated. But I must say, I've been doing fine without one. So looking at it, it looks like cut grass is basically a vast majority of everything, which makes sense. Cut grass is a lot of volume because of the water content, but that's going to shrink fast. This hill is going to be very small soon. So that's the point of building it up. This will not be a one and done thing. This will be a pile that we probably put in all of this year's cuttings at the end of the harvest season when we take plants apart, take the garden apart. So this is a perfect time to begin the preparation process. I'm gonna call that good. It feels decently mixed. Every time I take a fork in and pull it out, I see evidence of all kinds of materials. So I don't think I'm running into any clumps that would cause matting, which then would breed the anaerobic digestion that I do not want. Okay, that's basically it. Let's water this in. Let's cover it up. We'll throw this thermometer in, and then we'll call it a day. Easy as pie. Get out of here, y'all. All right, black bag one, number one. One. Bag number two. Let's go get some water. One last troubleshooting idea that came to mind. If you are tempted to put sticks and other large woody things into your compost pile, that will slow down the process. It's A, not very good at moisture retention for the microbes that are going to be doing a lot of the work, and B, is going to just really overload the system and slow it down. As tempted as you may be, make a pile of sticks next to it. If you want, you can break it down, chip it, do those sort of things, and then add it. But remember, very small bugs have very small mouths. Stick big, bug small. Not gonna go well. Moving on. Okay, so we have our bucket of water. Again, I'm just gonna kind of apply it all over. One last little stackaroo. I would prefer to have the pile as tall and all of the material kind of neatly stacked on top of itself, as opposed to a wider, larger pile, because I want more volume stacked up close together to allow there to be more, reacting going on. Got that piece of plastic. Now let's cover it up. Another reason I cover it up is, as you were seeing, the chickens love to kick it up. And if the chickens kick it up, there's no pile. No pile, no reaction, no decomposing in the timeline that I want it to be. And now we just need some weight. And for that, we go to our wood pile. Okay. Thermometer. I don't want to poke a hole in that new bag, but I'm not too scared to poke a hole in this old bag. And there we go, nice and snug. That pile is done. In the next 2 or 3 days, I'm going to come out here periodically to check the thermometer for action. I should be seeing activity happening at least by day 3. If not, then something's going wrong. Maybe it's not moist enough, so I'll hit it again with a bucket of water and then check the smell, see if it's turning funky. So that's been building a compost pile from scratch with the Urbstead. Thank you for coming by. I hope this was very educational for you, and I hope that this answered maybe some concerns, questions, and fears about starting your composting journey. It's just that, it's a journey. I'm just now starting to get to a place where I feel semi-confident enough to share with you how I build mine, because I'm seeing some success in my own process. So don't get discouraged, and don't stop trying until you get it right. And also, it's not that big a deal time-wise or otherwise, but it will save you in the long run for your own garden journey if you're creating compost at the same time. It also does keep a lot of excess waste down. As someone that I know mentioned, there's a lot of waste that comes from our kitchens that's sitting in a landfill somewhere, just turning into methane gas and other gases that break down, which I'm not fully sure, because I'm not the scientist that understands that topic entirely. I do know, though, that there's a ton of waste spent on food, which it doesn't have to be. It can be taken care of right here in the backyard, or with something like chickens. So this is Ben, this is the Urbstead, and as always, grow on.